Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of The Package Tourist, hosted by yours truly, the Package Tourist and Magical Mystery Tour called Life, Matthew DiBiase. Tonight's guest is author Dona Masi. Dona resides in New Hampshire and is a writer and editor whose short fiction and articles are used in reading and writing assessments throughout the United States. Dona has published articles about the arts, the environment, and current affairs in various publications throughout New England. Dona is also a playwright, and 2 of her plays have been performed at the Provincetown Theater Company. Tonight, we will be discussing her debut novel, The Taking, which deals with a father and his daughter dealing with the paranormal. Dona, welcome to the show. It's a great honor and privilege to have you here. I'd like to start off by asking you, Dona, what led you to delve into the UFO phenomenon with your debut novel?
Hi. Thanks for having me, Matthew. Well, I'm really fascinated by the UFO phenomenon and the possibility of alien abductions of people on Earth, and I always have been. So I've studied the topic a lot, and I even wrote a research paper about UFO folklore while I was in college. And as a writer, I see a lot of drama in it because, you could just imagine if these things are true, how huge an impact it would have on people who are experiencers, emotionally and psychologically. And I wanted to write a book, which I did with The Taking, about what it's like to be a human being who becomes caught up in these strange events and they can't explain them and they don't even remember them until something triggers their memories and they then know what is happening to them.
Please share with our audience an overview of your novel, The Taking.
Sure. Well, it's a story about a father and daughter, John and Vera. And John's raising Vera alone in the shadow of the absence of her mother, who disappeared just mysteriously when she was a baby. And John and Vera deeply love each other, but they have a somewhat adversarial relationship. John tries, but his parenting skills don't always measure up to what Vera needs. And Vera's a difficult child. There are behind-the-scenes reasons for all these things, and over the course of the story, John sort of slowly and unwillingly comes to realize that the strange events that his wife used to speak of that were happening to her may be happening to Vera as well.
Dona, how long did it take you to write the novel, The Taking?
I wrote and revised the book over about 8 years. So It took me a while, yeah.
Ooh.
Well, off and on, but steadily, but then I'd take some months off and think about things, or I wasn't really able to devote myself, but yeah.
Okay.
About 8 years.
Sometimes there are certain autobiographical aspects, when writing a novel. Are there any autobiographical elements in The Taking, Dona?
Just one. It's not a story about me, actually, but there's one scene in the book that I modeled on a time when I may have had an encounter with a UFO when I was about 7 years old, which is the same age of Vera in the book when she has this particular experience.
Ooh, wow. We'll talk next a couple more questions. First, can you discuss some certain background details about John the father and Vera the daughter? What does John do for a living? Can you give us just kind of paint a picture about him in a certain way?
Sure. Well, John is a carpenter. He has his own contracting business. He's also a musician, and he's a good man, but he's hurting, because of the absence of his wife, and he never found out what happened to her. So he's kind of a man who's been stuck in limbo because he has a big hole in his heart about this. And one of the things it does is it keeps him from, letting himself become involved with a woman who he's been in love with for a while. And it also makes it hard for him to be as understanding of a parent to Vera as she tends to need. And, Vera's a smart but stubborn girl, and she has some anger toward John, but she adores him. And she definitely feels disturbed and anxious a lot of the time, but doesn't know why. And she's, I wrote her, I hope, so that she's strong and brave, and she stands up for people who she sees are being mocked and humiliated by others. Okay. So I think she's kind of in her own way, a noble person.
How old is Vera in the novel? What is her age?
She goes from age 7 to age 16 in the novel.
Okay. Donna, if Hollywood ever made a film of your novel, who would play John and Vera?
Well, some of the actors to play John are kind of different types from each other. And so I pulled some big names I'm thinking of right here, but I think they all have the acting chops for the part. Maybe the actor Damian Lewis, who I love. I think he's great. He can do anything. The British actor, or Brad Pitt. Maybe I think he could do it too. They may both be a little too old at this point, but I think that it would be a good character for them. And as far as Vera, well, there are a lot of talented young female dramatic actors, and I need to see more of their work. But I was thinking that if people read the book and they have any ideas about who should play John and Vera, I'd love to hear from them. They can send me a message through my website. It would be interesting to hear what their ideas are.
Have you made any attempt at reaching out to Hollywood or cable TV to get this adapted for either TV or Hollywood? Any attempts?
No, one of my things I'd love to do is to write a screenplay for it myself, and see where that led me. I was thinking maybe it would make a good series, versus, and I think there's more opportunities for series rather than movies. So I'd like to write a pilot for it.
Okay.
Someday. But I think it might make a great show.
Yes, okay. The fact that she's transitioning age from 7 to 16, you probably would need, some episodes, to convey the transition and all that, Okay, you just mentioned earlier that when you were 7 years old, you believe you had a UFO experience. Donna, would you be willing to share it with our audience? What happened to you?
Sure. Well, I was in school at the time, and I was at recess, and I saw something in the sky above where I was. I think I was on a swing or sitting on a bench. I can't exactly remember. But I looked up in the sky, and there was an object there hovering above me, sort of at an angle. And it wasn't that high up in the air. If I had to say, I don't know, 75, 100 feet. It's hard to say, but it was really quite big. It was shaped like the classic cigar-shaped UFO that you hear about. It was between two clouds, and each tip of it was sticking behind a cloud. And it was a very shiny object. The sun was glinting off it. It was gave off the colors of a prism. I think it had windows. I said to myself at the time, wow, that looks like a plane, but it doesn't have any wings. And so I was kind of really startled and so curious. Anyway, so I was looking at it, and at one point I looked away, and I looked back, but I feel like I had a short period, I don't know how long, period of missing time from when I was looking at it and I looked away and then I looked back. It was a very odd feeling that I'd never had before that, and I've never had it since. And it's hard to explain, but you just get a sense something happened, you don't know what it was. So I just got really scared at that point, and I ran back to school. And I forgot about it for a long time, but I'd remember it suddenly, and then I'd forget about it again, and I'd remember it until I got to the point where one day I just remembered it, and it stuck in my head. So that was my experience.
Now,
and I was just going to say that I'm not sure whether I dreamed it, I imagined it, or if it was real, actually. It feels like it was real, but I'm not going to claim that it was without knowing for sure.
Now, when you had this experience, was someone with you? Were there other kids playing with you or anything like that, or were you totally alone?
Well, I was alone because I don't know why I was alone, except for the fact that my best friend wasn't in school that day, and we always hung out together. And I was sitting on a swing and swinging, and the odd thing about it was there were kids in the playground when I saw it, because it was the middle of recess. But when it ended, at the point where I got scared and I ran back to school, there was no one in the playground. I was all alone at that point.
Have you ever had, I know with some abductees, and I remember it was like Betty Hill, before she went to their hypnosis sessions with she and her husband, she had dreams. That kind of, and then it was because of those dreams she went to therapy, did the hypnoregression, and that's where we discovered the alien abduction. Have you ever made that attempt to do like some type of a hypno thing to pull out maybe did you or did you not see this thing, or were perhaps an abduction? Have you ever made that attempt, Donna?
I haven't, and I hadn't thought about doing that until it was suggested to me by someone who's a regression therapist. And, it would be interesting, and I may do it. It would be interesting to get to the bottom of it. It's a little scary to think about, if it's true, but I think I'm ready to find out for sure whether it was something I imagined or whether I was actually there. When I think about it, sometimes I get very, very anxious. I have a lot of anxiety sometimes, like something inside me saying, that was real, you really saw it. But I don't know. I'm just going on my gut feelings. So, but yeah, I am considering that, and I may.
Okay. It's interesting you mentioned a cigar-shaped object. My mother, when she was a little girl, about roughly 6 and 7, she was living out in the country in Virginia, very extremely isolated, and this was before Roswell and the Kevin Arnold and the UFO craze began in '47 and all that, those flying saucers. And she said this story. She didn't see it herself, but as she was walking down a hill to go to to school, her mother saw a cigar-shaped object going from left to right at treetop level, cruising silently from left to right. And I wonder, just interesting when you mentioned, a silver, cigar-shaped object, so who knows? Maybe, and this was before, people knew about UFOs, before Roswell and all that, So early 40s, so kind of interesting, It
is interesting. I know it. That's why I'm so intrigued by the mystery. There's so many questions that are unanswered for sure.
Okay, what when you were doing your research for the novel, what exactly were you reading and examining to do your research? What books were you examining? Because there's so much literature. Some of it is very serious and thoughtful, and some of it is kind of almost ridiculous and zowie-owie. What sources were you using?
Well, I read a couple of works by the psychiatrist, what's his name?
Bud Hopkins?
No, John Mack, that's his name.
Okay.
He was a psychiatrist at Harvard, and he actually treated about 80 patients who it seems as if they were alien abductees or they had close encounters that they didn't remember. Some of them had conscious memories of things, some didn't. They had no idea what was causing their anxiety and their fear that they seemed to have developed, just overnight. And so they went to him, they went to a psychiatrist at Harvard, and he ended up being handed over, taking over these cases from another psychiatrist. And it was because he was interested in Eastern philosophy and maybe a bit more, ready to talk to these people than the people they went to initially. So I read some of his works, and I have also read a lot of research by Kathleen Martin. She's a ufologist, and she's also the niece of Betty and Barney Hill. So she was like a primary source to the whole event with them. She was one of the first people who heard about it, you know.
Yeah.
And then she became an expert on the case, and etc. And you know, I've watched a lot of documentaries. Some that there's one reporter, I forgot his name. He's out west somewhere, but he does a lot of research on UFOs, and he has a great series on Netflix of different cases that he's investigated. So he's a credible guy and been researching it a lot. And somebody wants to get to the bottom, you know, he's not trying to make up stuff and everything. So those people, you know, aside from that, watching documentaries, you know, and I also did a research paper on UFO folklore, where I talked to witnesses and I talked to investigators and UFO researchers, etc. So it's just been something I've been doing pretty much all my life, one way or the other.
Okay. Donna, how difficult is it in separating the credible aspects of ufology from some of the more frankly ridiculous and bizarre aspects of the phenomenon? Is it very difficult to do that?
Well, you know, sure, it would be. But in my case, I didn't consciously try to separate any of the aspects. What I did was to draw from themes that come up a lot in reports people give about their experiences with the phenomenon. And I chose from them what I thought would best serve the story in the taking. And mainly they had to do with how people reacted emotionally to these experiences.
Yeah.
And, of course, the things that they reported that happened to them, those concrete details, you know.
Yes.
So I wanted to look at the emotions they generate, like these experiences generate, like fear, confusion, shock, you know, disbelief, isolation, because people don't often feel comfortable sharing their stories because people will think they're crazy, you know, and also I wanted to look at the things I drew from were like the unconscious ways that their experiences affect people's lives and the way they see themselves in the world. And so all these things play out with my characters in the story.
You know, Don, it's interesting you live in New Hampshire because Barney and Betty Hill, whom you mentioned earlier, the famous alien abductees, lived in Portsmouth and had their famous close encounter of the third kind in Lancaster, New Hampshire, that vicinity. You know, how aware were you of their story when you were growing up?
I knew about it when I was growing up because it's one of New Hampshire's claims to fame.
Yeah.
And then over the years, I started learning a lot more about it. You know, and there's a lot of physical evidence to support that the Hills encounter was really an actual out of this world or outside of reality as, you know, we humans understand it event.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm pretty very familiar. And when I did my UFO folklore research, I interviewed Kathleen Martin, their niece.
Yes.
And she shared with me a lot of stuff about the case that I didn't know before. That was quite fascinating.
Yeah, I remember seeing a documentary. I believe it was her. They get into that. I mean, they actually had the fact that they took that sample from Betty's that staining on her, you know, clothing and all that. They were able to do some testing and all that. That yes, somehow she was probed and all that. Yeah. Did you ever see that telemovie with James Earl Jones and Estelle Parsons and Barney and Betty Hill that came out in the 70s? Did you ever see that telemovie?
I did see it a few years ago. My husband and I watched it on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
You know, because I knew about it and I wanted to watch it. And I thought it was really a good movie. I thought they were great as Betty and Barney.
Yeah.
The only thing that bothered me about the movie was I thought the aliens looked a little hokey, but I think aliens, if they're really fully shown in in a movie or something, they often look hokey. I just don't think Hollywood has gotten it right yet. So maybe they should do more like of the suggestion of aliens, or even more shadowy stuff, because I think that would be more believable and probably more frightening.
Well, the thing is, though, 50 years ago, Hollywood technology, it's not cannot compare with what we have today. I think it was at best a stretch. I mean, don't laugh. I wish they would do a remake of that. I wish they would do a remake of Interrupted Journey using, more modern technologies and, bringing up to date and all that. I always thought Betty Hill was a very strong woman. I mean, she was the real driver trying to get to the bottom of what happened to them both on that night,
Yeah, she was. Barney was, he really didn't want anything to do with it. He wanted to forget the whole thing if he could, but he too had dreams. And they were like Betty's. And then they got dragged into the public eye because the story was leaked.
Yeah.
And then, there was an article in a magazine, a newspaper in Boston, and then on it went. So they finally decided that they were going to be the ones to tell their story, and they had an interview with Look magazine, I think it was.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so they said, well, if anybody's, we need to be the ones that tell what happened.
Yeah. Let's talk. Now, you're a playwright now. Could you tell our audience about your experiences of being a playwright? What are your two plays about?
Well, one's a drama. It's a one-act, and it's about a marriage. And, the two people in a difficult point in their marriage and working things through or not. And then the other was a comedy, and it's kind of a farce. It's pretty silly and wacky, but it's about this oafish rich guy who inherited his wealth, and he's also a big child, and he has a staff of wacky characters that take care of him. And I got the idea of actually from real life because at one point for a short time I worked as a housekeeper at this house, and the man I worked for was just like that. He was just totally dependent on everybody around him to keep him alive.
Yeah.
And it was made for some very kind of funny situations. So I always thought I'd make a good play, and so I wrote about that.
Okay. Let's talk about you now, Donna. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Waterbury, Connecticut, and I lived there till I was 9, and then my parents moved to New Hampshire. And I've lived at other places for short times here and there, but mainly most of my life in New Hampshire.
What did your parents do for a living?
My dad was an industrial engineer, and my mom stayed at home when we were young, and then she started working for an agency later on, and then she became the director eventually. Both my parents were involved in politics for a long time, and that really, I think, helped me to develop an interest in politics and history and that influence.
Okay, municipal, county, state, what type of level?
Politics?
Yeah.
Town politics, and my dad was the chair of the Democratic Committee in Connecticut, state committee for a time, too.
Mm.
And he was also, he served he was a selectman, he was a council member. My mom was the president of the Women's Democratic Party in the town where they lived, and stuff like that. So,
wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
We used to go to political rallies and stuff when we were kids.
Wow. Where did you go to school and then later college?
I went to school in Durham, New Hampshire. That's where we lived. And I went to college I got my BA at Vermont College in Montpelier, Vermont, and then my master's at the University of New Hampshire in Durham, New Hampshire.
Okay. Now, before you became a writer, what type of jobs were you working? You mentioned you were like a housekeeper. What else besides that? What did you do?
Well, I worked as an administrative assistant. I worked Oh, I was a correspondent for newspapers. Well, I was a writer then, correspondent for newspapers. I have a background in theater, so I worked in the theater a lot, and I even made a living at it as a stage manager at summer theater and then regional theaters. So that, and let's see, I was a tutor. I tutored English and, writing and reading, and then about 25 years ago, I ended up working in education assessment, which I still do, and that's where I write passages for reading and writing assessments for departments of education around the country and such.
Okay. Donna, whenever I interview an author on my show, I always love to ask this standard question. Who were your favorite authors when you were growing up? And of those favorite authors, did any of them light the spark inside you to become a writer or perhaps influence your writing style?
Well, when I was a kid, I don't even remember who wrote them, but I used to read a lot of Nancy Drew and Hardy Boy mysteries, which I loved. And I loved Agatha Christie, too. I loved Lucy Maud Montgomery, Anna Green Gables. And after, when I got a little older, like adolescent age, I started reading classic authors a lot, like Tolkien and Thomas Hardy, Flaubert, Mark Twain, and on and on. And I like Kurt Vonnegut, too. I liked him. And one of my favorite authors was, and still is, John Steinbeck. So I would say, like, The Grapes of Wrath definitely made me want to model my writing on Steinbeck's because of the emotional power his writing delivers. And that's especially in Grapes of Wrath, but also all of his books.
Donna, please tell our audience, where can readers find your book?
Well, readers can find it on Amazon. It's on Barnes & Noble. And on my publisher's website, my publisher's Collective Inc. On my website, I have a button in the top right corner of every page on the site to purchase it on Amazon. And then, my website is donamasi.com, DONAMASI.com. Also, if you go to my socials on Facebook, my author page, you can find it there. It's in a lot of links and posts, and also my profile on Instagram.
Now, is your book available in stores, or is it strictly purchased online?
Right now, it's strictly online.
Was it conventionally published or self-published, Donna?
It was conventionally published.
Okay. Donna, last question. What will be your next book project or your next play, and when can we expect its release?
Well, I'm in the process of writing another book. I can't say right now when it will come out. I wish it was going to be tomorrow, but no, that's not true. So I'm really excited about the story because I do like the story. It's set in the 40s primarily, and it's about an Italian-American family. They live on a farm, and they're really struggling to hang on to their land. And so that's one of the crises they're facing. And there are a lot of outside forces that have put them into this situation. So it's a first and second generation immigrant story. And the inspiration for it is, my own Italian-American family.
Yes. Where part of Italy did they come from? Because I'm Italian too.
I wondered if you might be. Paisan, right? They came from Basilicata, so in the Avignano was the name of the city where their village was located outside of there, and it's in the part of Italy that's on the eastern side, kind of if you drew a line from Naples on the west coast and went inland, you'd probably hit it.
Yeah, I know exactly where it is. Don't laugh. My father's Aunt Rose, her ancestors came from Avignano in Basilicata. It's really right there on the bottom of the Italian boot. It's literally on the sole of the boot.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty big province. They say it's wild and beautiful still, like one of the wildest.
Very volcanic and rocky and volcanic and all that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
my people came from Abruzzi, which is for like the north part of the South, like midway on the boot on the Adriatic side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah, mountain people, very isolated and insular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did they come over?
My grandmother came in 1913 when she was a child, and my grandfather came in 1920.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, through Ellis Island. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Donna, I want to thank you so much for being on my show. And when your next thing comes out, let me know. I want you on my show again. It's so much fun having you on.
Thank you. I'd love to come back, and it was really fun talking to you.
Yes.
Thanks for the chance.
You're welcome. Okay, you take care.
You take care too, Matthew. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, for next week's show where I will be interviewing author Richard Wharton. I also like to remind my listeners that my book, Patriarchs of the Dugout, Baseball's Greatest Managers, is on sale at 25% off. It's available at Amazon in either paperback or Kindle. You just type in the title, Patriarchs of the Dugout, Baseball's Greatest Managers, or my name, Matthew DiBiase, MATTHEWDIBIASE, and you'll find it. And it'll remain on sale for the duration of the entire Major League season. So please get it. Thank you very much, and good night.